moving on to our next topic, which is Madison Square Garden. I am very happy to welcome our panel tonight. We are joined by our State Senator, Liz Krueger, our council member, Erik Bottcher, and Felicia Park-Rogers, who is the campaign manager for Tri-State Transportation Campaign, which is a civic organization that deals with transportation in the region and has been very involved with Penn Station and the impact that Madison Square Garden has on Penn Station. I don't see our state senator, Brad Hoylman, but he is supposed to join us. So while we wait for him, I actually prepared a little presentation just to orient people and give a little bit of an update on what is happening and why we're talking about Madison Square Garden tonight. So I'm going to share my screen if it's okay with everybody. Here we are. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. And let me go to full screen. Okay. All right. So we're talking about the future of Madison Square Garden, Penn Station, as well as our infrastructure, big topic tonight. So where we started, Penn Station was a grand above ground dignified train hall built in 1910 on the blocks bounded by 7th Avenue, 8th Avenue, 31st Street, and 32nd Street and 34th Street, super block. Where we went wrong, the original Penn Station was demolished in 1963 to make way for an office tower and an arena. But wait, if MSG moved on top of Penn Station in 1968, that's actually 5 years that it took to build the arena, where was it before? Because Madison Square Garden has existed for more than a century. So actually Madison Square Garden was built on Madison Square Park in 1979, and then it was rebuilt in its same location in 1926. Then it moved to a block on 8th Avenue and 50th Street, and it lived there from 1926 to 1963. Actually, it's not true. It's until 1968, because the current Madison Square Garden construction started in 1963, but ended in 1968. And this is where this beautiful building was then torn down, and Madison Square Garden took quarters in what we know today as being Madison Square Garden, the arena that is on top of Penn Station. So what is the current situation? As of 1963, Madison Square Garden requires a special permit to operate with a capacity of over 2,500 people. So Madison Square Garden owns the land, they own the building, but what they need from the city is a special permit so that they can operate with a capacity of over 2,500 people, which obviously is what they need. The total capacity of MSG is 22,000 people. The original special permit was issued in 1963 for a 50-year term. When it expired in 2013, a new special permit was issued for a 10-year term. So here we are today. Madison Square Garden special permit is expiring in July of this year, and the arena is seeking a special permit in perpetuity. So what's at play? The current special permit, as I said, expires in July 2023. The conditions to issue a new special permit, among others, is that MSG must demonstrate that they are compatible with Penn Station, and they must also demonstrate that the loading must not unduly burden the arena. The area, not the arena, the area. So the impact of Madison Square Garden on Penn Station is actually tremendous. 2 weeks ago, the railroad agencies, Amtrak, MTA, and New Jersey Transit, issued a joint report stating that MSG is not compatible with Penn Station. They note, among others, that the station is actually not up to fire code and evacuation rates because of the arena that sits on top. So can MSG become compatible with Penn Station? So the issue that we're dealing with is that the columns that support Madison Square Garden puncture Penn Station platforms, as you can see on this photo, with this column here that you see is actually a column that supports Madison Square Garden. And those columns are on the platforms as well as around the tracks. Madison Square Garden loading operations are also an impediment to the proper flow of pedestrian traffic around the train station. So who issues the special permits? The special permit is first reviewed by the City Planning Commission. So last week, the City Planning Commission held a public hearing on the application for a special operating permit. The hearing lasted 6 hours and 20 minutes, and the commission will issue their decision in early July. So this is part of ULURP. ULURP is the Uniform Land Use Review process. This is the environmental review of the City of New York. And we are in this phase number 4. So the City Planning Commission is currently reviewing the application and will issue their recommendation. They had a total of 60 days, so we're already way into those 60 days. Once they issue this report, it will go to the City Council for review and approval. The City Council doesn't actually have to approve, the same way with the City Planning Commission. They can approve, disapprove, or make modifications. The City Council will have 50 days to issue the final decision. And then the mayor plays a very minor role. The mayor has 5 days to veto. This is very rarely done. Usually in land use applications, the mayor does not exercise his veto power. So the City Council will have 60 days after the City Planning Commission issues their decision to vote on the matter. And something of note is that Madison Square Garden enjoys a real estate tax exemption. Since 1982, MSG is exempt from real estate taxes. The tax exemption is a state law. So what's next? We're here today to discuss it. I'm very glad that we are joined by our elected officials, and we can, let's see. Good evening, Senator Krueger. Good evening, Council Member Bottcher. And are we joined by Senator Hoylman-Sigal?
His name on a box. So
fantastic. Fantastic. So good evening, Senator Hoylman-Sigal. And we're also joined by Felicia Park-Rogers, who is the campaign director with Tri-State Transportation Campaign, which is a civic group, advocacy group that focuses on transportation and infrastructure in the entire region. So maybe we can jump in this discussion. I want to maybe turn it to our council member, Erik Bottcher. Do you need to correct me on anything? Did I miss anything? Or misspoke?
Thank you so much. That was a great overview and great conversation starter. Thank you so much, Layla, for bringing us together and to the club. I'm, for the first time in a long time, I'm actually excited by this opportunity that we have with the special permit. Like Layla said, the permit's making its way through the process. It just got heard at the City Planning Commission. We at the City Council are going to have hearings in July that we want everyone to attend. They'll be in person down in the City Council chambers. The reason that I'm excited is because we have an opportunity to finally get the grand train station that we need and deserve. And I don't think we'll ever recapture the grandeur of the original Pennsylvania station. God, what a crime of our architecture, right? Would give anything to get that back. But we have an opportunity to get a grand train hall. I've been on, as you all know, for years, I've been calling for Madison Square Garden to move. When I got first elected, I made headlines saying that. I've been on a number of different outlets calling for MSG to move. I suggested the Western Rail Yards, which Community Board 4 put the kibosh on. But I don't think we're going to figure this out by the time we have to vote on this special permit. And which is why, if I had to guess now, I would say that we're going to go with an extension and give us the space to really make a push for the great train hall we need. One thing I'm hoping will happen tonight is that we can parse out the different pieces of this whole puzzle, because there's a lot of conflation going on. That you've got the MSG special permit, you've got the concept of you've got the need to expand the capacity of the station, which Amtrak is going to be making a decision about in the next couple of years. Amtrak's going through a process where they're going to weigh all the options, including through running, a Penn South expansion, a northern expansion. They're going to weigh all the options. That is a separate process from the MSG special permit. And then you've got the whole GPP, which is another separate piece from the special permit. It's very complicated, but tonight I'm hoping we can dig in and like parse out the different pieces. It's going to be a big challenge to get this right, but we have to get this right because we really, really only do have one shot to get this right. And I feel the weight of history on us, on me and on us, because what we do here is going to be, it's going to really determine the next 100 years, 200 years for New York. So looking forward to tonight's discussion.
Yeah, no, it is a real big deal. For folks who are not super familiar, like we are on all these acronyms, GPP stands for General Project Plan. It refers to the real estate proposal that was introduced by the state in 2020 that would call for 10 super tall towers around Penn Station. We're going to try to be good with spelling out the acronyms so that we I know we eat those for breakfast, but we need to keep our audience plugged with all this technical stuff. So I want to turn it to Felicia Park-Rogers. Felicia, can you actually explain to us why it matters that MSG gets a short renewal and what impacts does it have on Penn Station?
Great question, Leila, and thank you so much for having me and for all of us here to talk with the Chelsea Democratic Club. I'm really excited to be here with you guys who have shown historic leadership over decades of time, and happy Pride Month to all of you. The key thing here is that Penn Station no longer works. We have a 1910 track and platform configuration that was built for intercity trains, and we no longer operate that way. In 2023, We have a regional transit system. Amtrak is part of that, and they are the intercity rail, but New Jersey Transit, Long Island Railroad, Metro North Rail, and the subways are the majority of the riders who are coming through Penn Station. The way that you would design a station today is very different from the station that we have. Unfortunately, as was mentioned in your presentation, when Madison Square Garden was built on top of the pre-existing infrastructure, they had to put all of these columns and all of these different things in place to hold the weight of the stadium. By the way, let's not let 2 Penn off the hook entirely, because that is also 1/3 of the super block and is a major building, and it's unfortunate that they're in place there as well. But Madison Square Garden is over the main parts of the tracks and platforms. So as the railroads today talk about their master plan to rebuild the station from the bottom up, they actually are not talking about the bottom up. They're ignoring the tracks and platforms, which is an extraordinarily important part of operations, safety, reliability, and capacity. And in order to have a truly working train station for the modern 21st century, we need to start from the bottom and work our way up.
Yeah, thank you. So we understand that it is a city issue for this special operating permit, but it is also fair to say that the state has a lot of regulatory statute on the arena. Because MTA is a major tenant and MTA is a state authority, and also because Madison Square Garden enjoys a tax exemption that is actually baked into state law. And then furthermore, as we've heard over the spring, Madison Square Garden has started using facial recognition to actually discriminate against patrons, which actually raises a number of issues that the state legislature has, basically focused on, including with a bill that was introduced by our great senator, Senator Hoylman-Sigal. So maybe I'm going to turn the question to you first, Senator. Can you actually tell us a little bit about the bill that you introduced, and what is the issue actually with the use of facial recognition? I think we all understand it, but I think just to frame that a little bit better for us. Brad, you're on mute.
Hi.
Yes, we can hear you.
Now you can hear me. I am headed to my home and didn't make it quite in time for this forum, so I apologize. But State Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigal, proud to represent this part of this district with Senator Krueger, who's chair of our finance committee and has been a terrific ally, along with Assemblymember Simone, and of course Councilmember Bottcher and the borough president and Congressman Nadler. So the bill we introduced would close a loophole that, well, there's a couple of bills. One is about the way Madison Square Garden has been denying entry for patrons based on their own assessment of the suitability of the ticket holder, which we think is a civil rights violation and is currently a subject of a lawsuit. Musical, theatrical performances don't allow the owners of establishments to willy-nilly deny entry for patrons who have a valid ticket. It does not exist for sporting events currently, according to a Supreme Court holding. So I've introduced a bill along with Assemblymember Simone to close that loophole. We have to move that bill. We did not get it moved this session, but I'm hopeful that if the court case isn't resolved in the favor of the plaintiffs, we can do that in the coming session. In terms of facial recognition technology, there's a number of bills in Albany that would prohibit the use of biometric surveillance at locations of public accommodation. It has a wider application to everything from supermarkets to subway stations and the like. This is obviously a growing concern with AI and biometric surveillance on the rise. In effect, everyone who enters Madison Square Garden or any of their properties is a suspect. There's obviously concerns from experts on civil liberties about the widespread use of this technology. So we have legislation that would curb, if not completely outlaw, that type of surveillance. And the third set of bills is around taxation, and Senator Krueger is an expert in this area. But suffice to say that Senator Kavanaugh carries a bill that he's had for years since he was in the assembly that would require Madison Square Garden to pay its fair share of taxes. They pay no property taxes at all. As you correctly described it, Layla, it's not an exemption, it's an abatement, and that's at least $43 million a year. They are saving, and that they're robbing from the city's property tax rolls. In the Senate One House, in our budget negotiations, Senator Krueger and I supported repealing that abatement. We were not successful in securing that in the final budget, but there is standalone legislation to that effect. There's a lot of advantages that Madison Square Garden has, including its proximity over top of the busiest train hub in the Western Hemisphere. The fact that so many of their fans have a one-seat ride directly into that arena. They should be paying something. And the fact that they're not cooperating with the MTA now, as the MTA and private developers look at potential for redevelopment of a new station, is an outrage. So I'm hopeful that the special permit that Councilmember Bottcher is negotiating will hopefully put pressure on MSG to cooperate, so we can get that train haul that we all deserve.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brad. Senator Krueger, I want to just follow up on that with you. So how do we get this tax exemption repealed? And how can, for example, this club help with this kind of efforts?
Great. So for years, we've made the assumption that we should get a home rule from the city of New York in order to reverse the abatement on Madison Square Garden. We don't actually need a home rule message, though, because we actually have the ability to change taxes at the local level without a request coming from the city. I think that, and I know that Dick Godfrey's with us on this call also. Hi, Dick. I think it's been sort of, the tradition of the state that when you're changing New York City's limited control of tax policy, you check with them first. And so historically, even though there have been people who have carried bills calling for Madison Square Garden to have their abatement taken away from them, there's not ever been a mayor or city council who asked for it. I certainly believe that, as Brad, I think, pointed out so well, other stadiums that actually, I guess he didn't go down this road, other stadiums that have abatements are paying pilots or something else in exchange, so they are continuing to pay their taxes. I think Madison Square Garden is the only stadium that isn't paying taxes and isn't giving the public or the community anything else in return. And of course, in the context of the permit, which is really what we're talking about now, we know there are things that we, the community, commuters from all over who use the Penn Station, Madison Square Garden area, and the MTA specifically, along with New Jersey Transit, really do need things from Madison Square Garden. And I don't understand why they should have any right to continue to get the abatement if they're not even willing to come to the table and agree to give the train station and the community the things we do need. So that is actually, I think, maybe entree to the testimony that myself, Brad Hoylman, and Tony Simone jointly submitted to this Department of City Planning for their hearing last week. And I'm very glad to hear from Erik that the City Council intends to do their own hearings on this before any final decision is made. Because basically our testimony said, we really don't think Madison Square Garden should get a permit at all. But if it's likely that they're going to, they certainly shouldn't get one unless they are prepared to make available the space in their footprint that the MTA and the community and the commuters of this region need to ensure a rebuilt, modern station that addresses so many concerns. And the fact is, and we talked about it in our testimony, that there are specific sections that Madison Square Garden isn't even using, the taxi pass-through, for example, that are desperately needed for anyone's proposed plans for a better Penn Station. And so we were, I think, quite clear in our testimony. If somebody is going to continue a permit to Madison Square Garden under specific agreements and stipulations, like a really big stipulation has to be Madison Square Garden is providing the space to Penn Station that is needed, again, regardless of whose ideas for a Penn Station rebuild you prefer, because that is actually a separate set of questions, right? I think maybe you laid it out, Leila, or Erik laid it out. I think Erik laid it out. There are lots of different discussions going on in this geographic area. Not all of them are connected, but anything involving Penn Station rebuild does connect to what is the availability and willingness of Madison Square Garden to provide the space needed if they're going to stay there. And it seems to me they're pretty clear they're going to stay there. Although again, and this is city territory, not state territory, if the city decides not to give them a permit, I guess they can stay there, but they can't use it for any of the things they've been using it for up till now, which in theory should be a motivator for them. But I'm working off the assumption they probably are going to continue to operate there. But as far as I'm concerned, that's a deal that's completely unacceptable unless they come to the table to provide the space and the access that the rail lines and the commuters need, below ground and above ground in that building.
It looks like there is a lot of possible leverage at this particular juncture. There's the tax exemption, there is the special permit. So who leverages who, and how do we get to a better place? Do we need the special permit to leverage the tax situation? Do we need the tax situation to leverage the special permit? How do we use that so that we end up getting what the MTA needs so that they can fix Penn Station and Amtrak what they need to increase the capacity? Like, help us understand, like, the politics of this whole super block.
So I don't want to speak on the permit because I don't feel like that's my territory. Going back to the tax exemption, the state can end that tax exemption with a vote of the Assembly, the Senate, and agreement from the governor. I sincerely have no idea where the governor would be on that proposal at this moment in time, but I think you are absolutely right. It is a tool for a leveraged negotiation with Madison Square Garden, which, in fairness, probably the city council and city government people have the most direct, I think, opportunities for the negotiations, because it does all tie into the continuation of the permit, which has, I don't believe, any state role.
Yeah. So pivoting a little bit, Erik, the community board recommended that, the preferred alternative is that MSG has to move, but that, while they stay until we figure out a permanent solution, they should have a special permit for 3 years. And MSG claims that they should have a special permit in perpetuity. So there's a lot of room between 3 years and perpetuity. Where do you see the needle falling, and what do you think is a realistic advocacy, and what is your position?
So I don't, we have to assume that everything we're saying right now is being watched by James Dolan, a recorded conversation. We're going to be going into the final stages of this ULURP process, and I don't want to negotiate. I'm not giving an inch publicly like this, and as far as I'm concerned, MSG has to move, and we're not extending the permit at all. Like, that's my starting point, and I want MSG to know that, and they know that. So that's where I'm starting. That's what I'm saying. And in the next few weeks, I'm going to be working really closely with you, Layla, and my state colleagues. I really want to be like tight, and work closely with you and get all of your advice and counsel as we work through this. Because I think all together, like you said, we're so much more powerful all together when you put us all together. So that's the posture I'm taking as we go into these final stages of the ULURP.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. One question that I think has been on people's mind is that MSG has stated that, they're not interested in moving. They want to have the special permit in perpetuity, but they also let it slip at a community board meeting that, they would consider a site east of 7th Avenue as being suitable, opening up the door to the possibility that they may move. And I think we're all realizing that we could be in a position where the special permit is issued for, a pretty decent amount of time, or maybe even in perpetuity. I mean, God forbid, but, it is a possibility. And then MSG may decide, so MTA and Amtrak would go and, do the repairs that they're planning to Penn Station. And then in 10 years, MSG may decide to move, leaving us with a huge hole and no more money in the bank to actually do what would have been fantastic upgrades and, the full renovation of Penn Station, including, giving it a, above ground presence, which currently, pretty much it doesn't have that. And, there are different proposals that bring a little bit more of a presence, but it's not quite ideal, once again, because MSG sits on top of it. So are we taking the risk, actually, if we are not careful, that MSG may actually decide, in their own term to move, leaving us with a really very unfortunate situation? And, I want to hear your comments, Erik, and then Felicia, I think if you have some thoughts on that. But let's start with you, Erik.
I think it would be like a pretty far-fetched that they would ever move. They're kind of sitting on top of a cash machine, like Senator Hoylman-Sigal said. Their arena is right on top of every train line that there is, except for Metro North. But even that's going to be coming. Metro North is going to be coming like within a decade. So the idea that they would move, I don't envision that, although I guess anything's possible.
Yeah, Felicia, what are your thoughts on that? Are we taking the risk that, they will move of their own volition, leaving us with, a big hole in the middle and no money in the bank to actually properly fill it?
I think that's a massive risk, and it's one that keeps me up at night. I find MSG to be very fickle. They are absolutely caring about their own bottom line much more than any public benefit. They have shown to themselves to be a terrible partner in working with the railroads for a very long time. If you spend any time walking around MSG, around Penn Station, there's no sign of MSG. In fact, the one sign that says to MSG, if you go up those escalators, it takes you into the horrible taxiway. It's very hard if you are actually trying to enter MSG from Penn Station, and yet they've done nothing at all to improve that situation for transit riders. And so they have been in place for almost 60 years. Their arena is obsolete in terms of what's the current gold standard or even bronze standard for arenas. Their loading is impossible. They have problems with going from the ice to the basketball to the, they call themselves America's most beloved station. But if you're outside on the street, if you're on 8th Avenue and 34th Street, you just see some billboards and some like really weird, ugly old architecture from the 60s. Like, I don't even understand. I can't imagine that they're going to want to stay there for a long time. And I can very much imagine that according to their own whims and their own business projections, that they could put us through all this rigmarole, be terrible partners in the process of rebuilding the upper train hall portion of the station, and then decide to move because they get a better deal, or they convince the governor to give them billions of dollars to relocate to a better space. So I think it's a very real risk. And I think that if they do stay in place and we do spend $8 billion or $7 billion to rebuild around them, that they need to do so with very clear requirements for participating in rebuilding the station, in being a good partner, and in staying and giving back, as all the other stadiums have had. As Senator Krueger was pointing out, every other stadium participates in giving back to the community based on the benefit and the literal billions of dollars of profit that they receive.
Yeah, thank you, Felicia. So if Madison Square Garden were to move of their own volition, or because their special permit is not renewed, what role would the state play in this relocation? Senator Krueger, Senator Hoylman-Sigal, do you have any thoughts on that?
The state is going broke, so just to share, we're facing now something like a $39 billion budget hole walking into next year. So no, I don't think the state will be offering them money. And if the state has money, frankly, they should be using it for the mass transit system that is so desperately still in need of capital improvement, of course, including Penn Station. So I don't know whether anyone has better intel than I do about Madison Square Garden's internal thinking. I don't pretend I understand the Dolans and don't even want to understand them. But I do not think that if they're holding their breath under the belief that somebody at the state or federal level, or frankly the city level, is going to offer them. I was told that they had one time told someone that they would need $8.5 billion for a new Madison Square Garden. I don't know where that number came from or why, but I'm pretty damn sure the state and the feds aren't coughing up that money, and I doubt the city is. So, I would factor that into what would happen if Madison Square Garden said they're going to move. If they're going to move, great, but they're going to have to pay for the new stadium.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the other thing that I would point out is that, you know, they own that property. So that was part of the problem in forcing, you know, that the notion that we would force them to move would be that it would cost a lot to do that, to say the least, not to mention where they might move, which, as Councilmember Bottcher pointed out, is a thorny question in and of itself. But I tend to agree that, you know, if they did move, I think you know, we would be throwing rose petals at the feet of Jim Dolan. They don't contribute to the tax rolls. Obviously, they pay different kinds of taxes other than property taxes. But I think they would be crazy to move out of New York City. I think the idea that New York City might lose its, you know, hometown basketball team and hockey team is at this point far-fetched. That, of course, was the reason why the property tax abatement existed in the first place. But as Ed Koch pointed out years later, it was only supposed to last a decade. Here's another fun fact. They don't pay their full electric bill either, which is another sweetener that was folded into their deal back in the 1980s. So they're not likely to move anytime soon, unfortunately, in my opinion. But if they did, I think, you know, again, as Liz and Erik pointed out, it's hard to put your head and, you know, on the shoulders of James Dolan, but it would not appear likely anytime soon.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to be mindful of time. It's already 8:15. Let's open up to questions from participants on this call. So you can use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. I know it is a very, very polarizing topic, so I'm going to ask you to limit the length of your question. And to keep it really a question. I can already see that, you know, lots of people have their hand up, and I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. We will start with you, Fran. Go ahead. Fran, yeah,
yes,
go ahead.
I want to talk about something. MSG, Madison Square Garden, is an iconic building. If you were to name any building in the United States that everybody might know, that would be the building. I'd like to, and that I think that this is a very important thing because it goes to the fact that they're not moving anywhere. They're not moving out of, I don't believe that they're going to move out of New York. And I would just like to add that I was at the last night of the old Madison Square Garden on 8th Avenue to witness the indoor running record of won by Jimmy Ryan. And it's a very, very special place. It's a very, very special place. And it's special to sports fans and people who go to hear Billy Joel around the world. And I think that this is something that we shouldn't lose sight of. I do think they should be spending more money of their own, including taxation. So
thank you, Fran. Actually, Billy Joel lost, suspended his residency at MSG last week. The next question goes to Eugene Sinigaliano. Eugene, go ahead.
My question really is, and thank you to the senators who pushed so hard for them to pay their fair share, that at-risk members in my community who will be displaced and our rent stabilization stripped away from us over this whole project, who pay our taxes. Madison Square Garden pays no taxes at all, and yet they seem to be calling all the shots whether or not Penn Station can even be fixed up in the slightest. And there are huge columns, and all the problems that come from that being on top of Penn Station completely ruin the chances that Penn Station can actually have more capacity within their own footprint. And I don't think people have really looked at the cost of moving Madison Square Garden, where all that is removed and we can build a beautiful Penn Station without that on top of it, as opposed, and what the capacity increases would then be with all those columns removed, as compared to the massive cost it's going to cost to buy almost 2 city blocks and then destroy those and build an expansion. So my question really is at some point, Madison Square Garden needs to be pushed. It needs to be pushed hard. It needs to move, because if it moves, it's going to actually save money, not cost money.
Thank you. So if I summarize your question, Eugene, it's along the lines of like, what is the cost of not moving MSG?
And having to pay to do a southern expansion, because you can't add much capacity to Penn Station with all the columns running down through the platforms and the tracks. That's exactly correct.
Yeah.
So I would love to, I'm sorry, Layla, could I?
Erik, yes, take it.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you for that question. A missing stakeholder from this discussion and many other discussions is Amtrak. And I met with Amtrak for nearly 2 hours last week and went in great detail into what they're thinking. And according to Amtrak, they're totally agnostic about whether or not MSG moves. And according to Amtrak, like, MSG's presence does not preclude through running. They, my request to them was, like, when are they going to get out into the community and explain to the community what their decision-making process is in detail? Because it's Amtrak that's going to decide what their plan is for increasing capacity at Penn Station. And what they told me is that they're going to be coming out to the community this fall to do community meetings. And that will be the start of a 2-year review process where they're going to be weighing through running versus a southern expansion versus a northern expansion versus whatever other options there are. I really want to dig into get them out here and have them really get into the weeds on all the details of their process and all. And they say that they're going to come out into the community. That's what we need them to do, because they've been kind of hanging in the background. And, you know, it's not going to be ESD's decision about southern expansion. It's not going to be MSG or anyone else. It's going to be the Amtrak and the Gateway Tunnel Authority.
Yeah, thank you, Erik. Felicia, I see that you have your hand up. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add that that 2-year process they're talking about is the NEPA review, and they will be running the different alternatives and the 4 alternatives. And one thing that we ask at Tri-State and many of our other transit-oriented advocates are asking for is that when they look at through running, they use a cost-benefit analysis lens, and also that they use a fair and honest version of through running. Currently, the one they use is an MTA model that's on its face a terrible plan, and of course would never be picked as a reasonable alternative. So we ask that they give through running a fair chance. And the other thing that I would say is that currently New Jersey Transit is the organization that's running all the models and doing the early analysis on this. And it's important to remember that New Jersey Transit and Amtrak share the Northeast Corridor tracks. And so when you start talking about how do you improve the capacity, there's obviously a huge need to improve capacity of trains coming from New Jersey. And with the gateway, we'll be doubling our capacity of tunnels, which is very, very important. I will, to my last breath, this is a hugely important project. But what happens after you add those tunnels and how you run into Penn is still very much up in the air. And it's important for people to remember that Amtrak has its very own unique agenda that's not necessarily the same as the overall regional agenda that involves New Jersey Transit, LIRR, Metro North, and the subway system.
Yeah, thank you. And just to explain what NEPA stands for, NEPA is the acronym for the Federal Environmental Review process. So, and because Amtrak is a federal entity, they have to subject this whole process to this kind of environmental review. But it's very similar to ULURP. ULURP is for the city. NEPA is for the feds. Bert, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, before I get to my question, I just want to say something about what people have just said before about capacity. One, we have to thank Chris Christie, because without Chris Christie, we would have had that second tunnel built. We would have had Independence Station already. But Chris Christie, when he first became governor, one of the first things he did was said, screw that tunnel. So we never got it built. Okay, thank you, Chris Christie. I'm trying to be ironic. Two, you know, some of that the Long Island Railroad trains now go to Grand Central. So that, and I would like to know, and I haven't seen anything written about, how has that changed the Long Island Railroad use of Penn Station in terms of capacity? I know, you know, the Hudson line will start coming into Penn Station. The old New Haven line coming across the Hellgate will now come into Penn Station with the commuter trains. Is that going to take up the Long Island Railroad capacity? Is it going to be a 1-for-1? I'd like to have an answer to that. But moving away from the capacity, my first question is, so this Italian architectural firm emerges, and I'm not sure exactly, I still don't understand who they're working for, how they emerged with this plan proposal to, and I think Felicia, you wrote in the chat, you know, that they're proposing to buy that whatever they call that theater, the whole theater on 8th Avenue, tear it down, make an entrance to Penn Station, open up the back where the taxi is, all kinds of plans. Who are they? How does that fit in? Are they working with Madison Square Garden? Are they working with the railroads? Who sponsors them? Where'd they come from?
All right, so maybe I can take a crack.
If anybody
at,
has an answer to that,
I can take a crack at the facts, and then I would love to hear the comments or maybe corrections from our panel. So the Italian company is ASTM. Their North American branch is led by Pat Foy, who is a former chairman of the MTA. The person in charge of the project is a gentleman by the name of Peter Cipriano, who used to work for the federal government, for the US DOT in the Trump administration. Our understanding is that they have negotiated a preliminary agreement with MSG where they would put equity and acquire what is known as the Hulu Theater. I mean, this theater has a number of names, but basically it is the theater that is within the footprint of Madison Square Garden that sits on towards 8th Avenue. And they would acquire this theater and they would demolish it and convert the space into a grand entrance and train hall with an above ground presence for Penn Station. In addition, they would also take the taxiway and they would convert the taxiway into an atrium similar to the MTA proposal. The difference between the MTA proposal and the ASTM proposal is that ASTM is proposing to take over the Hulu Theater and convert it into an entrance on 8th Avenue. And the MTA is proposing only to convert the taxiway into a new entrance to Penn Station that would not have an avenue frontage access into Penn, but would have access from 31st and 33rd. So that's what we know on the facts. Their business
The other thing,
model-
Layla, sorry, just in terms of the design.
Yes, go ahead, Erik.
The other thing that the ASTM plan is proposing is to kind of build a shell around MSG, encase it in a shell around the sides of the building and move a lot of the operations and stuff that are under a lot of the space underneath MSG right now is like operations space for the railroads. They would move that out from underneath into this shell around it, making more room underneath. And one thing it does do is makes like MSG almost disappear on top from the street level. You wouldn't see it as much.
But I would add also that it comes with a hefty price tag because the state, the MTA would have to end up purchasing the Hulu Theater in effect. And we don't even know what the Dolans would charge for that. Some are saying upwards of $1 billion, but it's an unknown. But it's definitely an intriguing plan. Bert, to your other question about Long Island Railroad, Senator Krueger and I took a tour recently with the MTA, and they say that yes, while ridership will decrease to Penn Station because of the new train hall at Grand Central, they expect that to be in effect overridden by additional capacity coming into Penn Station from elsewhere. So the net will be still more riders at Penn Station, according to MTA, even with the Grand Central Madison terminal siphoning off some riders from Long Island Railroad.
And just to add that in, that's one of the reasons why there's a desire for the MTA to get going on the rebuild of the core Penn Station, because there is some decreased ridership now because Grand Central Long Island is taking some of those riders, but we're scheduled to have the Metro North going into Penn Station within a matter of, I thought I was told 5 years. Someone will know better than I. And that will then, of course, increase ridership into Penn Station. So people are seeing sort of that there's this window to get something very real done in Penn Station, sort of in this 5-year window. And of course, we know we have some federal money available to us now that, who knows what happens as administrations change and DC's story changes. So I think those are also motivating factors. And just to go back to the gentleman, I guess, Ben, who was, or was it before Ben? The person who was talking about, the Southern Bloc and Amtrak. Really, I know it sounds ridiculous, but those decisions, which are going to be out into the future, don't really tie in directly to the decisions that can be made now about moving forward with Penn Station improved build. So when they talk about Penn Station expansion, I guess they're talking about the Amtrak Gateway trains connecting through, but that's really a decision, both as was clearly made, being made by a different entity, the federal government through Amtrak, and Erik's absolutely right. We need to get them more engaged in coordinating with the community, and they have not been, and I'm not sure that they think they have to be, but that isn't necessarily tied into what decisions are made or not made about the block that Penn Station and MSG are on at this point.
Yeah, I think that the argument, if I understand it correctly, is that if we were to implement through running, and if through running was the preferred alternative to increase the capacity, meaning that you can bring more trains into Penn Station and therefore more passengers, then you would not need to demolish the block to the south. So, and because MSG is a big hindrance to actually creating through running, because it narrows the platforms and encumbers them with all sorts of, stuff and clutter. If one were able to move MSG, then a lot of work could happen at the platform level that would then facilitate through running, that would then increase capacity, and then that would, prevent the demolition of the block to the south. But I think that
Amtrak, just for the, Amtrak says that's not true. So one thing I would love to do when we should do it like this summer is really like get to the bottom of that, because Amtrak says that that's not really a factor in whether or not they go with through running, but we definitely should like sit with them and their engineers and really dig into that in a big way.
Yeah, no, totally. Felicia, what is your understanding of that?
Sorry, I was busy writing in the chat. What is my understanding of the through running
of whether through running has any impact on capacity?
Okay, this is what I was just writing into the chat, is that through running can increase the capacity of the current Penn by 35%, which is a tremendous amount of capacity increase. What the MTA and the railroads say that they want to increase is by 50%. And they say that their expansion plan proves out that that's possible. They also say that it's impossible to, the way to increase that 35%, you have to redo the tracks and platforms. And Amtrak insists that that's not possible to do while keeping the current service running. However, at the same time, they keep pointing out that there's going to be this time where LIRR trains are reduced and before the Metro North trains come in, which could be a window in my mind that you could reorganize. And by the way, we've all seen them doing track and platform work at Penn Station and closing down different tracks over different time periods. So to me, it's a disingenuous argument that they absolutely can't do any work on original Penn while also maintaining service.
Well, track 11 is closed for repairs at the moment, as of yesterday at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is possible. Okay, I just want to move things along. I see that there are many more hands up. Pamela, you have the next question.
Thanks, Leila. Is it entirely unrealistic to think that since Vornado has created a massive hole where Pennsylvania Hotel existed, that there isn't in someone's mind somewhere a thought that perhaps MSG would make a deal with Vornado and relocate across the road? Is that just not a viable thought at all, or is there any possibility that that could be in somebody's mind? Thanks.
Well, this is Brad. I mean, it's now Senator Krueger's district, so she should definitely, and the council member should definitely speak to it. But what's their incentive to do that? The state would have to, somebody would have to buy them out. And that's just a very expensive proposition. as far as I can see.
So there's no way that Vornado would benefit by striking a deal, whatever the deal might be. It just seems like so propitious that this would be happening right across the road. And I think I remember being in a meeting where someone from MSG actually sort of said that, yeah, well, if that was an option, we'd grab it, or words to that effect. Am I wrong, Leila?
No, they did say that in front of a live microphone. So, it's recorded for all to to listen. Just to bring some numbers, the price tag that was put on acquiring MSG, demolishing the existing venue, acquiring land elsewhere in Midtown, and rebuilding the arena per ESD, the Empire State Development Corporation, the economic arm of the state of New York. They put a price tag on that to $8.5 billion. MTA puts a price tag of $7 billion to reconstruct Penn Station with MSG in place. So if you want to do it totally right, it costs, provided that we agree that, doing it right is moving MSG, but I think that there's, pretty much consensus on that. If money is no object, I think we would, and nobody's will gets in the way, everybody's on board, everybody would say, yes, of course, move MSG. So the price tag to do that is $8.5 billion per ESD, and the reconstruction with MSG in place is $7 billion. So the difference is actually not that great.
No, I don't think you're correct. It would be $8.5 billion to move MSG, and it's still probably going to be close to $7 billion to redo Penn Station. So it's
no, that includes reconstructing Penn.
The $8.5 billion?
Yeah.
That is not my understanding. I'm sorry. No, that is, we'd have to go back and revisit, but I don't believe that was the number to take everything apart, pay for a new Madison Square Garden, buy that land from them. I'm pretty sure that's far more. That the $8.5 billion is just the MSG part of it.
That was, we can go back to the documents.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Pam, do you?
Leila, I apologize. I have to go to my event, the Sophie Gerson youth event. I hope that's okay.
Yes, and I think it's time to wrap up. Maybe we can take one more question from Roberta, and then and we have one more question from Dave, and then we're going to wrap up. Roberta, go ahead.
Say is we cannot talk about Southern expansion without talking about the human sacrifice that we would be imposing on tenants, on seniors, on people living in affordable housing, on small businesses that will be destroyed. We are talking about destroying a community. And I hope that every time we talk about that, we talk about the seniors, the tenants, the small businesses. My office used to be in one of those buildings that would be set to be destroyed. So I know that area really well. And I just hope every time we talk about it, we talk about human sacrifice. I remember being at a demonstration and this woman, it could have been your wife, Eugene, who said to me, "Where are we going to go?" And I said, "Well, this isn't settled. We have a couple of years." She said, "Well, we'll just be older." And I want everybody to keep that in mind when you're talking about this. There is this big human element. It's not just about through running. It's not just about Madison Square Garden moving. It's about the direct effect on people here. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Roberta. And those are, our neighbors and our community. I don't know if anyone wants to address this comment, and we can also move on to Dave. I know that we're really getting to the end of the meeting.
I will say this, just that, and I know Senator Krueger and Councilmember Bottcher and our other colleagues recognize this, there is often not the concern articulated about the local community. You know, there's just an assumption that transit is a, you know, societal value, and that's all we should be maximizing. But you're absolutely right, Roberta, that the, you know, that's our job, is to continue to, and that's why, you know, the council members is right to talk about Amtrak's a necessity to respond to the community and be more engaged, because it's a very vibrant community and the planners often forget that.
Well said.
Yeah, very true. Dave, you have the last question. Go ahead.
Okay. You know, as an architect reading the report by the railroads, I was really alarmed by the public safety issue that was raised. They point out that smoke purge is not code compliant. Smoke kills far more people in a fire than fire does. And emergency travel distances are exceeded by over 40% above what the code requires. And watching the City Planning Commission hearing and seeing the give and take between the railroads and MSG, I didn't see like they were going to come to any kind of agreement. You know, it didn't look like there could be a positive outcome. And, you know, I have to say that to know about that kind of safety issue, especially if you're a public official, you really sort of have to take on responsibility for that. To know about it and not to do something about it is to share accountability for any tragedy that might come of it. And I think absolutely limiting MSG's permit to 3 years is an important thing to do. If they got a permit in perpetuity, you know, you're just extending how long that really emergency public safety concern is going on. And Pamela raised the issue of the Hotel Pennsylvania. Beyond the Pennsylvania Hotel to the east is the old Manhattan Mall, which is a huge, largely unused building. And the block to the north between 33rd and 34th Street, it's largely low-rise buildings facing Macy's, or it's high-rise buildings that are getting to be quite antiquated, which a developer would probably want to replace anyway. So I think it would be quite easy to put together a super block site there that MSG could move into. And it could be connected under 7th Avenue by a tunnel. There are existing tunnels that connected the Hotel Pennsylvania and the Gimbel's department store to Penn Station. Maybe those could be widened. And if a perimeter of that new super block was made a public corridor, say at the basement level, that could allow people arriving in Manhattan from Penn Station to get to the central part of Midtown out of the weather through that corridor system. It could make for a much better Penn Station, a much better Madison Square Garden, and it looks like we're only looking at a delta between the costs of keeping MSG where it is or building new of $1 billion. And when you consider the benefit to the city down the road, I really think it's something that we can't afford not to do. And, you know, Midtown in general is decompressing. It has 25 Empire State Buildings worth of empty office space. So right now is kind of a perfect time to find a new home for MSG. And I think that site is really ripe for consideration. Parts of it could have higher construction that might go above the top of Madison Square Garden. It's very difficult to build over a long span arena, but maybe the corners could be developed. Maybe there's a way of working with Vornado. I don't know if eminent domain would play into it, but I think, you know, if we're going to be a great city in the tradition of the city that built Rockefeller Center, you know, we should be thinking big like that and not just looking for kind of public-private sector deals where we're compromising with the private sector. I mean, I throw the thought out to the elected officials who are listening. Do you see a path to that kind of solution?
Speaking for myself, I know nothing about any of those pieces you talked about, so I have no idea about any kind of feasibility of that. So I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah, I think that, there is plenty of challenge, but also possibly plenty of opportunities. I think that, it's those are very complicated issues. But, I think the liveliness of this event tonight really, shows that there's great interest. And I really look forward, and I think CRDC looks forward to, continuing to engage on this particular topic. It's going to be really at the forefront as it goes through the city process. But we're getting almost to the 2-hour mark for this event, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Councilmember Bottcher, State Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigal, State Senator Liz Krueger, Felicia Park-Rogers of Tri-State Transportation Campaign. Thank you to all the participants who attended this event. It is really great to see so much engagement on this issue that is so important to our community, but also so important to our city as well as our entire region. So very grateful for that. This session is recorded, so hopefully we'll be able to upload the replay for those who are interested in going back to it. And once again, we want to thank our elected officials for participating tonight, taking the time so generously to be with us. And on that note, I want to wish everybody a very, very good evening and happy Pride Month to everyone.
Hi, and I just
Evelyn,
have
turning
to
it back
add,
to you.
Good night.
thank you. I want to just
Night.
add, very soon, we are not going to have meetings in July and August. Our next general meeting will be in September, and it's going to be in-person, either here in Hudson Gills, Fulton, or in Hudson Gills. And also, I want to thank all the elected officials, Dick Garfey, Erik, Liz Krueger, I'm sorry, and everyone for joining us today in our very informative program. Thank you all.
Thank you so
Have a
much,
blessed
Evelyn,
evening.
our fierce and fearless president. Thank you. Really appreciate
Thank you.
it.
And also, I want to thank the program committee for such a lovely job. Thank you, Leila. Very good
Thank you so
program.
much. And thank you, actually, yeah, very important. Thank you to the program committee. This is, of course, a team effort, and I'm very grateful for all the hard work. Thank you all so much, and have a lovely summer and happy Pride.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.